Welcome to another edition of the Armstrong Williams Show, where this broadcast takes place during UNGA's meeting in New York. And we're sitting down with Iqbal Surve, who is the consummate entrepreneur who hails from the country of South Africa. He's built a $1 billion business over his lifetime, and he joins us in this exclusive. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Armstrong. Thank you for having me on your show.
Where did you grow up?
Cape Town, just around the mountain, around Table Mountain in Cape Town.
Did you grow up during apartheid?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Talk about growing up with your parents and what the environment was. And did you ever imagine that you could amass such a fortune over your lifetime, given the conditions?
Well, I don't think that we would have seen freedom in our lifetime. You know, those of us that grew up during apartheid really didn't think it would happen during our lifetime that we would have freedom, that Mandela would be freed and others would be freed. So it was a big surprise to all of us. Of course, a surprise in a way that we had fought against apartheid, against injustice. But growing up during apartheid as a child, you know, there were trains for white people and black people, buses, schools were for white people and black people, universities were exclusively for white people, with the exception of a few people that were taken in on the quota system. Black people moved out of areas that they lived in for decades, if not many hundreds of years.
Did you and your family consider yourselves black when you were growing up?
Yeah, we were definitely black. Yeah. So in South Africa, the definition of black was anyone that was not European or not white. So we fell into that category, and black was sort of categorized as three major categories within subcategories: African, indigenous African, colored, and Indian. So we kind of fell into the colored area.
And what are your original roots, though?
So my father, great-grandfather, came to work on the sort of sugar plantations in Durban on my father's side. My mother's side...
From where?
From India. They came from India. My mother's side, you know, they came from Germany. So they came immediately after the First World War. So there was an intermarriage. So Cape Townians are very much intermarried community.
How did your parents prepare you for the success that you enjoyed, that so often along the way empowered others, in terms of, not because of, but in spite of apartheid, it was necessary that you get a good education?
Very much so. My dad was the eldest of, he had 11 brothers and sisters, plus an extended family, and he looked after about 20-odd people in a tiny 2-bedroom home in Kenilworth, in the suburb of Kenilworth. And he said one thing to all of us: look, under apartheid, you're not going to get opportunities in business, you're not going to get opportunities otherwise, but what I can make sure you do is get educated, and with that education, you can build a future for yourself. So out of the family came many doctors, many lawyers, many accountants, many teachers. And so he was instrumental in making sure all of his younger brothers and sisters, our own family and others, got educated out of a small, tiny cafe.
And you started in the medical field.
Yeah, I was a doctor for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the preparation for becoming a physician in South Africa and then becoming a physician, and how the country was beginning to change.
Well, first of all, I was educated at the University of Cape Town, which was one of the top universities in the world. It was the place where the world's first human-to-human heart transplant was performed by Christian Barnard. So it had a huge reputation. But it was also a university that was exclusively for whites, except for about 10% of the university quota system was reserved for blacks. But I was one of those blacks that got in. You had to be really good to get in, because there were 10 times more blacks than whites.
Well, your parents prepared you for that.
Of course, with hard work, resilience.
And they had emphasis on education.
Totally, absolutely, totally. And getting into UCT was difficult because it was all white lecturers, white university, white hospital, segregated wards for blacks and whites. We could not train with white patients. We had to train with black patients. Even dead bodies, you could not cut up dead bodies that were white. You had to cut up bodies that were black. In pathology, you had to look at black patients only, or black dead people, etc. So it was.
Do you think this led you to graduating with a subpar education compared to everyone else?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I was one of the top students, and black students really, I think, were no different in a way than any white students at the university. Although we were treated differently, we could not, participate in the schools.
But the lessons were not different.
No, not at all. The same. They were the same lessons, and the white lecturers, many of them were hostile to us as black students because we were not meant to be there. I mean, they kept on reminding us that, this was a white university. We had to get a special government permission to be there.
But in no way did they respect your academic acumen, where you earned their respect through your intellect. Did they not begin to take pride in the fact that a possible student could graduate from under their tutelage that could aspire and do great things in the world?
There are very few of them that believe that. The vast majority did not want us there. The vast majority, in fact, did not want you to be very bright and very smart, because they wanted the white students to always shine out, and that was the reality that we, as black students, we had to contain ourselves in exams, because that was how it was. But there were a few professors that were white that were really kind and really supportive, and And I think those are the ones that built a very good relationship with the black students.
And what happened after you graduated?
Well, during my time at university, I got very much involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. And so
How old were you at the time?
I was, I think, in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And at the university, we had a number of organizations that looked after political prisoners that came out of detention and torture. And so we started some psychological rehabilitation programs and all of those things. So it was also, although it was as a scientist, as a doctor, it was also in a very politicized environment, because we were some of the few black doctors or students at the time. And so we tended to look after our communities, especially those that suffered during apartheid.
So you considered yourself a conscientious objector?
Very much so. I was very involved in providing rehabilitation programs, very involved with communities, in providing sort of first aid programs to help them overcome the issues of the security polices, the army invading the townships, beating up people, torturing people, etc. I guess it was natural for us because we came from those communities.
Do you think you were marginalized as a physician?
Not as a physician, no, because there were so few of us that when we qualified, it was important to. There were so few of us that looked after the black community, because there were so few doctors and health professionals. So in a way, when we qualified, we tended to focus on our communities because there were so few. White doctors were not really working in those communities. And you could look at the proportion of doctors to patients. I'm just giving an example. It may be in the white community 1 to 10,000. In the black community, it'd be 1 to maybe 500,000.
Wow.
So we tended to focus on helping our communities, and because there were so few of us, it became more meaningful. So far from being marginalized, we were actually really appreciated by our communities, and that was important to us. Yeah.
So when did apartheid end for you?
Well, I guess it ended properly and officially around about 94, when we had our first democratic election. But about 1990, when Mandela was released, that was the beginning of the end.
Were you still a physician at the time?
Yes, very much so.
What was the impetus for you to leave the field of medicine to pursue the business marketplace?
Well, I practiced for 10 years as a doctor, and when Mandela I was very close to Mandela, not as his doctor, but as a confidant. And after he got released and he became president, he was concerned, and he said so in so many words, that we had political freedom, but we did not have economic freedom. But he didn't mean, small-scale economic involvement. He wanted black people to be involved in the macroeconomy of the country. And so he made a call, and he said, look, those of you that, yes, you may well be professionals, but we need some of you to go into the mainstream economy in order to really get black people to be involved in the mainstream economy. And I was unfortunately one of those that chose the short straw.
And what did you choose?
Well, I thought my involvement in business would be very, very short, because I was asked by, Mandela and others to be part of a grouping that would help black people in the mainstream economy, and that would be really as what you'd call a non-executive director or a trustee. And that slowly morphed into, hold on, this is going to require a lot more effort, a lot more organization, a lot more structure, a lot more thinking about the economy, a lot more information. And so reluctantly, after 10 years as a doctor, I had to leave medicine, and I had to lead up this investment organization.
And welcome back. Talk about what really prepares you for it. And when you say entrepreneurship, you just don't lead a family, 10 plus kids. The kind of apartheid that you spoke about, a university which you felt in some ways marginalized you, but medicine uplifted you and you found your voice. You had purpose in your life. You just don't leave all of that and all of a sudden build a $1 billion company. Take us on that journey.
I think what I wanted to do was make a bigger difference than what I was just doing in medicine. And yes, I loved medicine. I was a wonderful doctor. I cared for my patients. But at the end of the day, when Mandela asked us to get involved in the macroeconomy, it was, could we bring real economic freedom to our people? Could we get involved in the real economy of the country, which was then almost exclusively a white economy? And I guess we looked at what we had, which was our own resources, our own abilities. We took risks during apartheid. It was a big risk coming to the University of Cape Town, a white university, to become a doctor. It was a big risk trying to become a doctor with no money, with no bursaries at the time for black students, having to work. So we understood those values or principles of entrepreneurship. It was about risk-taking, it was about resilience, it was about hard work. What my parents taught me was that, anything's possible if you apply your mind to it, if you work very hard. You can, as poor as we were, as difficult as it was, to get 20-odd people educated from a tiny, tiny little cafe.
But tell our audience the businesses you built.
Well, we built different businesses in the food and fishing sector. We built in technology. We're a huge technology investor on the African continent. In media, we have lots of media companies as well. Civil security and defense, e-commerce. We have one of the largest e-commerce businesses. So it's a very, very diversified portfolio. And I guess that is because there are no black companies that were in those sectors in the economy.
How much were you aided by Mr. Mandela as president of the country at the time?
I think, Mandela was inspirational.
I'm talking about in terms of government contracting.
Yeah. No, very little.
None of that.
No, very little. Nothing.
It's important.
No, he was more inspirational. Our focus.
So you built this in the private sector,
very much
not through government.
So.
I think it's important for you to share that.
Yeah, 90% of our business was built in the private sector, and it was important to compete in the private sector, to be innovative, to be to be able to look at the solutions that could be provided to South Africans through business, through enterprise, and that's what we focused on. And also, because we came from our communities, we built different kinds of business models. We built those that were socially conscious, partnering with our communities, and creating career pathways for black people. So if you look at our group today, for example, 90% of our group is black, and the vast majority of our group is African. That it's headed by indigenous Africans. So that is not something you'll see in any other large conglomerate within South Africa. We specifically set it out that way.
How many employees?
At the moment, about 8,500 employees and about 40,000 dependents,
Contractors?
Yeah, contracted,
Independent
absolutely,
contractors.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to enter the media space?
Well, this was an area which was almost, which was at the top end, exclusively white, and still owned and controlled by the same people that owned the media during apartheid. And initially it was a conversation with my daughter that spoke about, Dad, we should talk about black narratives. Black people, the way the white media was reflecting black people in South Africa was that they were barbarians, they were this, they were that. Whereas in our home,
even after the end of
very
apartheid?
Much so, absolutely. Even, very much so. We are talking now 2012. So that's a long time after apartheid ended in 1994.
Has much changed today?
No,
You hesitated.
unfortunately, no, it hasn't.
Not
regrettably.
come on, not much has changed.
Not much has changed. So while political power sort of does rest in a way with the black liberation organizations like the ANC, the problem is that the people that fund those organizations are still the same people that own the economy pre-94. The media is still predominantly, except for us as a large-scale media house, is owned by the same people. And the economy is dominated, I think less than 3% of the stock market is owned by black people.
Are you saying that blacks don't have the opportunities, or they're not just willing to take the risk like you? Long before you ever thought you had any possibility of becoming the conglomerate you are today?
Armstrong, the opportunities may well be there, but at the end of the day, you need a couple of things. Firstly, you need capital. Capital remains in white hands in South Africa today, except if you want government support. Secondly, you need the opportunity to compete in the economy. Now, South Africa is very much a monopolistic economy because that's what happened during apartheid. The big conglomerates, some of the world's largest companies like Anglo-American, which were domiciled in South Africa, reinvested all their funds back into South Africa because they couldn't invest it overseas. The third thing that you need to do is you need to build up a very strong entrepreneurial and professional black management class. And whilst that's happened, there's been a ceiling for black advancement even within these big corporates. And it's really not broken. There's lots of statistics. I can rattle them off left, right, and center. The statistics speak for themselves that black advancement at a professional corporate level has not reflected the demographics of the country.
So you do say that some of this they are accountable and responsible for. It's not all.
Oh yes, very much so.
Yes, please continue.
No, very much so. I think that we have to accept that we as black people could have done better, and we should have done better. But we should not ignore the reality that the macroeconomy is built in such a way that it constrains the advancement of black people. Black people also have tended to focus mostly on government business, which is the problem, because that business is full of, challenges, corruption, difficulties, tenders. very few black people or entrepreneurs have focused on the private sector. And the reason for that, because the private sector is difficult to penetrate and compete in South Africa because of who owns the private sector and the constraints that are put in for competition. That it's very different to America. I think if you put a lot of black South Africans who have the potential and the abilities in America, they would succeed here. There's no question about it. But they would not succeed in South Africa because the economy and the way it is structured doesn't allow for black success. That's not to say that all black people are not successful or cannot be successful. No, they can be, but it's a lot more difficult, with the current structure of the economy. The banking sector is controlled by whites today, the macroeconomy, all the big corporations, everything. Now, I'm not saying we must be against white involvement in the economy. Not at all. I think it's a good thing. We are all South Africans, white and black. We belong to the same country. What I'm saying, it's not acceptable. Since 1994, we are 30 years almost into our democracy, into our freedom, into our liberation. There has to be greater black involvement in the macroeconomy of our country.
Are they educated and have the tools that your parents empowered you with to take advantage of these opportunities?
Yes, more and more black youth are being educated at universities.
More and more, but is that enough?
Well, they can't find employment. That's the first problem. And if they do find employment, they are limited in their career pathway in these corporations.
Because of the power structure.
That's exactly it.
This is the Armstrong Williams Show. Iqbal Survé is our guest. A very insightful conversation.